And he goes, how do you feel about fighting in the UFC? And I was like, what? I fought every single one of these opponents at their very best. So my dad's going to hospital. Is he going to be okay? I had to go and still do what I had to do. I felt like a little click on my knee. And they said, Modestas, you got 5 minutes. Then I kicked the wall as hard as I could, click back into place. First front kick I land, catch, counter, break my nose in the first punch that he throws. Winning has no loyalty to no one. As soon as the dream happened, got taken away from me again. I always knew I was going to come back. You can't go into a comeback story half-assed. What's going to be in the future is that I'm going to be back in the UFC. The Baltic Gladiator ain't done.
What's going on, everyone? My name is Simon Debietis, and this is the Faster Podcast. Today, I'm joined by someone with an amazing story, Modestas Bukauskas. Modestas, tell us a little bit about yourself and what is it that you do?
Right, so I'm a professional MMA fighter. I fought in the UFC, which is the biggest organization in the world, and now I've just recently signed a contract with Cage Warriors. So this is where you could say the journey continues from the UFC run, yeah.
That's awesome. So your nickname is famously the Baltic Gladiator. So tell us a little bit where that name comes from and why the Baltic Gladiator.
Well, obviously, you know, you couldn't really tell by my accent at all. Obviously, sounded like a proper British geezer, but, you know, being born in Lithuania, and I was just going to say you pronounce the name absolutely perfectly. Obviously, being Lithuanian, you don't get many people that get it 100%, but do you know what? It's mad. It's not actually a very elaborate story. I literally just, a guy messaged me on, or I think it was on Instagram, and he was like making loads of like photos and stuff like that and editing them and stuff like that. And I had a couple of people I kept on asking for nicknames, and they came up with some weird like the Incinerator and stuff. I'm like, come on, man, like, let's do something that's got like a bit more, like, I don't know, a bit more class to it, you know what I mean? And then they were saying like the Slavic James Bond and stuff like that. And then a lot of people like commented and said he's not Slavic and stuff like that. And then so like I said, that guy made that photo, and then he said the gladiator from the Baltic states, and I was like, that's actually pretty catchy. Oh, what about the Baltic Gladiator? And then I told him to re-edit it, and he made it the same thing. And I actually can't remember the handle of the guy on Instagram that did it, but yeah. So basically, this was right before I got signed to the UFC. Like, I had like kind of photos of me like getting ready once I got signed and everything, and before my first fight. That's essentially how the name came about. So yeah, I mean, it fell in place amazingly.
Yeah, it suits you perfectly. So let's talk about it. How did you get into mixed martial arts?
Well, it was actually my dad. He was a very high level fighter back in the day. This was before, you know, obviously MMA was mainstream. Like, the rules weren't like, you know, universal. You know, they had like gloves that were like pretty much like plastic bags. Sometimes they didn't even have gloves. So, you know, he was like very high level fighter. And obviously, you know, I think when I was born, that was pretty much when, so my sister was born and then I was born, and then he pretty much stopped, you know, competing professionally. And then we stayed in Lithuania for like 3 years, and then I moved to the UK when I was 3 years old. And yeah, pretty much as soon as I got to like 5 years old, you know, me and my dad were kind of just like, oh, just playing around on the pads, you know, like a little kid, you know, and then it's like, oh, look at this cool kick and stuff like that. And then, yeah, literally about, I think it must have been like 3 weeks that we were just having fun. He goes, all right, Modestas, we train hard now. I'm like, what?
You wasted no time.
Yeah, I'm like, I thought we were still having fun over here. And yeah, I pretty much competed in my first kickboxing fight when I was 8 years old. And yeah, I pretty much never looked back since in terms of, you know, training martial arts. I did take like breaks and stuff like that, but I started out in kickboxing, so we just like started predominantly in the striking arts. But he also taught me sambo, which was another one of his main things. You see in some of his fighting videos, they would wear gis, but it was like full MMA. So like, you know, he would like do throws and like grab the collars and all that. So I kind of started learning all of that kind of stuff. I actually competed in judo for a lot of times. I was a 4-time British kickboxing champion, and then yeah, I took pretty much a massive break to pursue other things, and then I came back when I was 18. So you could say it's pretty much been an all life sort of thing, learning through martial arts.
How was it growing up and being a competitor? So like you said, you were competing from what, you were like 8 years old. How different were you compared to like the other kids in school? Because obviously at that age, everyone's focused on, you know, their consoles and playing around outside and playing football and things like that. Meanwhile, you're there stepping out and, you know, putting your health on the line and fighting.
Exactly, yeah. No, like 100%. I think I remember like vivid memories of just like, you know, you like you said, you see people out there, like all the kids like they're like playing around, and I'm like, you know, kind of indoors, like just waiting for my dad to come back home after just so I think he would pick me up and then he would pick my sister up from school, whatever. So I'm just waiting there and I'm like, I know what's gonna happen. I'm like, I'm gonna have to start training like properly. It's just like, you know, you kind of, but it got me like got me very disciplined from a very early age. You know, obviously having to, but at that point, obviously I had no choice. I just had to train, you know. So friends would do like people would do like other things. I don't know. I kind of found it hard for me socially to, you know, connect with people maybe when I was a bit younger, because obviously I was different, you know, like we were doing these certain things and stuff like that. I had like sort of ups and downs. We moved to so many different schools and different places that, you know, kind of I couldn't even keep track as myself as an individual. But yeah, man, like it was definitely something that built me. Like instilled the lessons needed for the discipline to go on later on, because there was times where I'd literally be crying because I didn't want to train, but I had to anyways. So I think that the thought of even being forced to do it actually instilled a lot of good values in me. Whereas nowadays you could say that might be frowned upon, you know?
Yeah, so your dad, like you said, was a high level competitor back in Lithuania, when back in the day it was the former Soviet Union and things like that. So what was he competing in back in those days? You mentioned Sambo, obviously, but like you said, it was kind of weird because the sports weren't really developed and some of them were illegal even.
Yeah, they called it no holds barred. So essentially, the best way I can describe it is just like the early days. This was like literally, he retired just as the UFC was coming about, which is crazy. So at that point, it's like there's so many fighters that were all around that sort of area, like in the Baltic states and Russia and all of that. But all the mainstream stuff was happening in America. So he was kind of, it was just before the time of everything starting to blow up with Hoist Gracie and stuff like that. So from him learning like the Sambo and the striking and stuff like that, and the karate and stuff like that, he sort of blended it together, and then what they were competing in was basically just exactly like MMA, how it is
just
now.
Show up and fight.
Yeah, exactly. Show up, whatever art you bring to the table, and get on with it. Do you know what I mean? But obviously, I think over there, like everything was a lot more similar. Whereas in America, they had like other different arts that were sort of more prominent. But around that, where we were, he was probably everyone was doing a bit something more similar, you know?
So of course, with your dad's game being so varied, like he said, he done karate, there was, I think, boxing, you said as well, wrestling, and you said Sambo, judo. How does that impact your game as a fighter? Do you feel like that makes you a more rounded fighter as well? Because a lot of people, of course, in the UFC, they will have their main striking martial art, which would be like Muay Thai, and they have something like Jiu-Jitsu, and that's pretty much it. Of course, some of them cross-train, but you seem to have done so many different things, and you were exposed to so many different different martial arts early on in your life. How does that impact your game now as a fighter?
I think I definitely think it makes things easier to learn for me. Like a lot of people, they'll look at a technique or they'll look at some stuff and it'll take them ages to get it. Whereas with me, it clicks for me a bit better. And I think it's because, like you said, I've been exposed to so many different things. And it's given me like a base, like I say, a base to be able to learn things to get the most out of all these different arts, you know. I mean, I got up to, I think, a blue belt as a junior in judo, and I remember I used to get my ass whooped all the time at the beginning because I was a lot taller, so I was a lot heavier. But then I would always go compete against kids that were like 3 years older than me, so I was much stronger, and I'd always lose. My sister would go home with gold medals, and I'm sitting here like, where's my gold medal? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, so your sister got into competing as well?
Yeah, my sister, like literally the whole way through, did exactly the same as me. Competing in kickboxing, competing in judo, but she was a much better judo player than I was at the time. As the time went on and I developed more as an athlete, I started winning stuff. Yeah. But obviously the physicality was definitely a massive factor.
Yeah, it starts becoming more and more apparent.
But yeah, man, so I think that's what has really helped me today, is just to be able to pick up things a lot better and to have a much better overall martial arts mind, is the fact that I've been exposed to so many different things, basically.
So let's talk about your journey to the UFC, because obviously you were a very high-level champion before that. So let's talk about your first championship belt and how did you achieve that?
Right. So I turned pro. So I'll start basically from when I was an amateur. So at amateur, I got a record of 7-1. I was fighting for WC MMA because, again, it's funny how times have changed. Like I say, as the years go on, the organizations and stuff like that, the most prominent ones back in the day aren't so prominent now. And like I say, times change. Obviously now they've got UFC Fight Pass. They didn't have it back in the day. But yeah, right when I started, fighting for WC MMA, which was the amateur version of UC MMA, which was like the big sort of UK show. That's what I ended up starting fighting on. My only loss was to a really high level wrestler who essentially just took me down. But I ended up front kicking him and he ended up having a massive cut on his head. And I have this picture of me all covered in his blood and it looked like all gory and cool and whatever. But if I look back at that fight, I'm actually well, he made it very boring, just trying to take me down and everything. And that was the one significant strike that I landed on him. But so anyways, so I ended up getting a 7-1 record. At that point, I was 21 and no one wanted to fight. I was supposed to defend my title because I'd won the title for WC MMA, and then literally no one wanted to fight me, and the guy that I was supposed to fight ended up not turning up. So I literally came in, weighed in and everything, and the geezer didn't turn up, and I was like, are you kidding me? And I'd already had an issue trying to find opponents already before that point. So I thought it only made sense for me to go pro. And then pretty much from 21, I moved on to UCMMA, which was the pro level show of that. And then I think, I don't know how many fights I had on there. It must have been 4 or 5 fights. I had a 4-fight win streak. I went and fought for their title against it was way too early for me at that point in my career. And, he was literally one of the top ranked guys in Europe. It was too early for me, but this is just after I'd gone out and trained in America, in Albuquerque, and with John Jones, and so obviously my confidence, I thought, everything should be really good. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do in training, you got to be able to go out and perform. So that's when I ended up winning 4 in a row. Then I lost my first fight, which was very devastating. But actually, I'd already got eyes from Cage Warriors at that point. After I'd won 4 straight, already after my debut in UCMMA, apparently Cage Warriors already had their eyes on me because I beat one of their guys, who was also Lithuanian, funny enough. But yeah, he was a very highly tutored guy himself. And then the fact that I beat him was no one expected it. So so after 4-1, I signed to Cage Warriors, and then ended up fighting an Irish guy, very last minute. They found it hard to get an opponent with such short notice in London. And the fight ended up going my way. Everything was all good. Landon was spinning back kick, and then out of nowhere, I just got caught with a right hand. It happens in this game. And next thing you know, I had my second loss in a row. And at that point, there was a lot of doubt and people not believing and thinking, oh, well, he's just some scrub now. Do you know what I mean? And stuff like that. So at that point, it was just then I had to just really try and think, what do I need to work on to change and fix everything. And then, so obviously, I then, it was a long time because I actually ended up at the end of that year having knee surgery on my right knee because I had a meniscus tear, so I had to get that repaired. So obviously I was out from that first fight on Cage Warriors. They just signed me to a 4-fight deal, and I lost the first fight, which was in their eyes probably a fight that they thought I should have won. And so obviously that angered quite a lot of people. I had a long, massive layoff, but technically I'm still under contract. We called them to ask them, can we take we're ready to fight, and just no responses.
So they put you on ice.
Yeah. We then asked them can we do a kickboxing fight? No responses. So we just took the kickboxing fight anyways, because we were like, well, we're not going to get a fight otherwise. So, and again, against another Lithuanian guy, I ended up having a kickboxing fight. He's a very good fella, and he's actually doing quite well in MMA now, funny enough. But yeah, I won by spinning back kick. I think I really badly hurt his liver in that fight. But like, he literally just walked onto it, spinning back kick, and then yeah, he couldn't continue. Yeah, it was a pretty nasty shot. That got the attention of Cage Warriors. Then they finally said, okay, we've got a fight for you. So it's like, it's mad that I had to go through all that situation just to even get myself a fight. So then, yeah, then we started, winning fights, picking things up. We went to Sweden. We were supposed to fight a highly touted guy called Kenneth Berg, and then he ended up pulling out last minute. And weirdly enough, he ended up being in then the replacement's corner, which I thought was a bit weird. The fact that he pulled out because he had a concussion or whatever, and then next thing you know, he's in my opponent's corner. Like, it just didn't make any sense. But whatever, I won that fight in Sweden. Then again, I had a couple little injuries and stuff like that, a little bit. And then I wanted to get a fight again. And again, Cage Warriors just couldn't find a space or a time or whatever to find me a fight. And it's just, there's a lot of frustrations that were happening because we just didn't understand what was going on. And I just wanted to fight. I'm like, well, if you're not getting me a fight, like, I'm under contract. But obviously I beat two guys in a row, but not to say that they weren't like as highly tutored. So it's kind of like, oh, okay. I still needed to build myself up, and they didn't really at that point care about me too much. So they allowed me a 1-fight release. So I was allowed to go and fight somewhere else. I won the Fight Star belt. There. And then after that, they offered me, my dad basically goes like, listen, we need to fight a good guy. Like, don't give us someone with a bad record. Give us someone with a winning record. We want to fight someone who's good. Like, we want to prove. This was, in our eyes, this was our chance to prove ourselves. It's like, a lot of people told us that we're not good or we're not that. Like, okay, give us a shot. So Cage Warriors did exactly that. They gave me Marcin Wojciech, high-level guy in Poland, was winning on KSW and stuff like that. And he just signed a 1-fight deal to fight me on the show, because obviously Cage Warriors was very well respected, and it was already starting to pick up a lot of traction. Cage Warriors now at this point, like they literally, I think they had a massive break and they just come back, and now they're like really starting to do well and like break ground and get fighters off to the UFC and stuff like that. So this was a fight where I really badly needed to win, because this was my chance to get. If I lost this fight, I wouldn't go to the next level. That was the fight that I needed to win to go to the next level. And again, it's always seems to be like a comeback story for me, because I was down on the scorecards for the first 2 rounds because he kept taking me down. I landed some good shots, but he kept taking me down. So in the eyes of the judges, obviously he's winning, right? And then he got very tired on his last takedown attempt, and again, it almost became like a bit of a signature move for me. I ended up winning by spinning back kick again. So I landed it. It was a highlight reel finish that made Cage Warriors, think, damn, okay, maybe there's something to work on here. And then shortly after that, we got offered the title shot against Marvin Hamlet. But every single fight was, I think, match made. And do you know what? I used to find it I used to be very offended by it, but I'm not offended by it anymore. I'm like, do you know what? Actually, business-wise, they had to do what they had to do. Business-wise, they're trying to think, what's the best thing to do, in this situation? Because if I would have lost against Wojciech, I don't think they would have signed me to another fight, or, it would have been in a situation, it's like, okay, we can get rid of him now. You know what I mean? Like, he can stop bugging us now, do you know what I mean? And then they offered me the title shot. And this was another situation where the guy was signed into a 1-fight deal. If he wins, there's a Copenhagen UFC card coming up. Boom, there's his shot. But then there's me. It's like kind of getting fed to the lions almost. So it's like, oh, okay, we're gonna hand him over this guy. He's good. He won a good. He beat a good guy in his last fight. So we feed him this guy so that he can go off to the UFC, and then Cage Warriors can look good and stuff like that. I have to admit, like, aside from all of this, I just know that it is how it is. Like, Cage Warriors did take good care of me, and I do appreciate it. They found me the fight. The main thing is, you got to go out there and prove yourself. So the fact that I did, they gave me the opportunity. So I'm thankful that they did give me that opportunity. And then so obviously we ended up beating Hamlet, again being down on the scorecards. No one thought I was going to win. I think it was a 4-1 underdog. I made like a load of my friends 150 quid because I all told them like bet your money, bet your house on this fight, and they all bet like a load of money because the betting lines, like I said, it was like massive. He was a massive favorite. It started shifting to my direction because obviously everyone started putting bets on me. They're like, bloody hell, what do they know that we don't know? So then I won the Cage Warriors belt, and that was a massive achievement for me already. And at that point, that's when I signed with my manager, Jason House, who's probably the best manager right now around. He's an American guy, and he's got loads of guys into the UFC. And at that point, he thought, we could get you in on the last second step into the UFC. And then we were waiting. Cage Warriors were like, we need you to sign to a fight and stuff like that. And we were still waiting to see. And then after the Copenhagen card passed, my manager goes, listen, just win one more fight and we'll probably get you in there. So I ended up fighting Riccardo Nacilia, the Italian lad, and the elbows. That became a very famous thing again afterwards. I won by elbows, TKO. And then, pretty much shortly after that. And even the moment, I remember, there was a lot of uncertainty. I was like, what am I doing now? Am I going to go to the Contender Series? Am I going to, I'm going to sign for another fight in Cage Warriors? Like, it was getting towards Christmas and getting towards New Year, and I still don't know what the hell was going on. After November, all I wanted to do was fight again. So I'm like, I want to keep my name out there. I want to keep competing. Like, I'm training, but I don't know what I'm training for. You know what I mean? I've got nothing set up. And then, literally at like 4 a.m, I got a message from my manager saying, are you free to talk? And it's not like I just woke up randomly at 3-4 in the morning. It was obviously you go through a mid-morning piss, and then I like checked my phone. And I thought, listen, technically I'm asleep, but I thought, all right then, fine. I'll answer his call. I'm like, because I thought this was a bit weird. Like, he never usually calls me. Like, he literally he missed-called me about 3 or 4 times.
Must have been something important.
I thought, why don't I give him a call and tell him what's up? And then he like talking on the phone. He's like, how you doing, mate? I'm like, yeah, not too bad. It's 4 a.m, but other than that, I'm okay. And he goes, how do you feel about fighting in the UFC? And I was like, what? Like, no way.
Yeah.
Like, wait, what? I literally had to like question him again like for another 4 times because I'm like, is this actually like real? Like, are you being serious? And then he told me, that they kind of were deciding, and then pretty much the matchmaker just goes, nah, fuck it, let's just sign him. Let's because they were kind of just waiting, and like, they didn't know if there was enough space on the roster. And then he goes, nah, let's do it. And then that was it. I got signed to the UFC. So I know it's been a very long-winded story, but
no, but it's perfect. That's what we're here for.
But pretty much it was. It was a very long journey and a lot, like I say, a lot of people like doubting me, like thinking that, and it's just the same the whole way through. I've never got the recognition or the validation that I ever wanted, and it's always me having to really fight and work to get that. Like, my first fight on the main card for Cage Warriors was my last fight, was my title defense. Not even my title fight was on the main card. So it's like, no one really thought much of me. They only started promoting me properly after I'd won the belt. But again, I understand business-wise why all these things made sense. But at the same time, you become very, not bitter, but it gives you like that extra motivation. Do you know what I mean? Like, people are always like...
So let's talk about that. Before we move on to your UFC career, how do you deal with that adversity? How do you deal with people doubting you? Because, of course, MMA in general, it's a very highly covered sport. There's a lot of blogs, there's a lot of YouTube channels commentating, they trying to review fighters, their performance, etc. Because I know, for example, Joe Rogan, he says he never reads the comments on his podcast. How about you? Do you read the news about yourself? Do you read what people are saying? Do you listen to it? Or do you kind of isolate yourself and focus on yourself?
Yeah, I mean, usually when it comes to like people saying stuff on the internet, I usually just don't pay attention. It's funny, you look at guys like Paddy Pimblett, he actually responds to everything and like, kind of takes the piss out of it. Like, it's crazy. Like, he actually gets enjoyment out of that. And yeah, exactly, gets into it. But it's mad because I think at the beginning it used to affect him, and then afterwards he's learned, I'm just going to, like, make a joke out of it. For me, I've just, like, kind of, I see it and I just, like, now I just use it as fuel. What I found was it wasn't so much what people were saying online back in the day when I was coming up, like, you know, after 2 straight losses. It was more people around me that caused me to have some sort of, like, you know, like I say, you could see the doubt and you could see the people just like not thinking that you're ever gonna make it, or you're ever gonna do well. And it just became prominent, you know, even when you go to training sessions and you go to certain places and you realize the look on their faces are different to when you're winning everything. And it's just how it is in life, isn't it? But yeah, that was a really massive thing for me, because especially after I came back from injury, and, you know, I was starting to try and make my run back into Cage Warriors to do well. Like I say, like, people, it was like I was a ghost in certain places. Like, people didn't even say hi. And it's mad because now after the UFC, everyone's like, "Oh, how are you doing?" I'm like, well, what about when I lost 2 in a row and you thought that I was nothing? You know what I mean? And you know, it's those kind of like personal, like life sort of situations that gave me that added like motivation. But seeing the doubt in real life as opposed online never really, I guess you can say it never really affect. Like, you know, when you see on like Lithuanian newspapers sometimes, and, you know, you see some of the comments and stuff like that, you're like, yeah, you know, you're thinking, you know, what do they know, sort of thing. But at the same time, I know I have, like, on the flip side, I have like a hell of a lot of support as well. So it's like, you know, from where I was to the bottom to coming up, that has always been my main source of motivation, was that I was never seen as that guy that could ever do anything. I was never seen as that guy that was ever going to win anything. I was always the underdog. And it's mad how that kind of, it's weird, that dynamic changed to then people starting believing in me. And then unfortunately myself, like, for example, going on to my UFC career, I actually didn't perform the way I wanted to. So when they started believing in me, that's when I actually didn't, I actually didn't show up when it should, you know. But at the same time, these are the things that I think are supposed to happen in a certain way, and that you're supposed to have this path because it's going to bring you to where you want to be. And it's the life lessons that you have to have. I learned a hell of a lot of lessons having all these people doubt me coming up, and, you know, just for them, even just to promote more guys differently and stuff like that, and not promote me like I was already, like, you know, it's like, okay, I'm going to give you something to promote, you know. I think the fact that it made me go to training all the time, it made me go and do the appropriate things to want to be there. But I had to turn down friends, like going out and doing things, and, you know, because I'm like, and even they then didn't believe, do you know what I mean? But it's mad, everyone only believes in it when you actually do it. So it's like, you've got to do it, otherwise you do you know what I mean? Like, now that I've actually taken this step, that I've actually refuse a whole load of outings, and, like, I put myself in this position specifically myself. Now I've got to make it happen. So it's kind of with the mentality of I must make it happen, not I might make it happen. It makes you, you know, do everything more the correct way to get yourself in.
It's non-negotiable for you.
Exactly.
So there's no other way. Did you notice a lot of fakeness when you actually did get into the UFC? Because you said obviously people changed very quickly when they saw that, you know, now you're part of the UFC. How did that change sort of your surroundings and how people treated you and things like that?
I think I actually, like, really enjoyed the attention, to be fair. Like, I'm not gonna lie, you know, I don't want to sound like a narcissist, but, you know, I throughout my childhood and all the time, I was always, like I said, I was just that guy who never really got validation or acceptance by people, from girls, from friendship groups and stuff like that. So for me to finally get that and just kind of, like, you know, get a chance to actually be that it guy, like, it actually felt pretty nice. Even though I always knew in the back of my head, like, well, okay, I know what you guys were like before, but, you know, I still appreciate that you guys are all hyped up on me. But I will, as I've gotten older, I sort of look at it in a different way as well. It's like, you know, well, I can't really blame them. I wasn't performing. So I understand your friends are your friends, but for people to be, like, all hyped up about you, you've got to be performing. So I don't feel bitter towards that anymore. People who end up saying that they're, like, really close and they are really supporting you, and then, you know, as soon as something changes, they're not. That's when I'm like, okay, well, F you then. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't be bothered to be even around. Like, my circle right now is so small. I've only got a couple of people that are really, like, fully supporting and thinking that, you know, they want to they want to be around me through the whole journey. And I'm gonna go something to, like, a little bit deep, but it's mad because I think like my parents are split up, but you know, me and my mum, we've had like a very up and down sort of relationship, and I love her to bits, and I think she's absolutely amazing. But obviously, when you're losing, and you know, I think a Lithuanian mother, they want their son to be, you know, financially stable. They want him to get a good job. They want, you know, I think because they put me into private schools and stuff like that, they want to be an accountant or, you know, something of you know, in their eyes, probably, or in her eyes, a bit more of a higher stature, you know, or not some, you know, cage fighter, you know. And I remember, you know, she's seen me lose and this and that, and I think there was always that kind of like, oh well, why is he carrying on doing this thing? It's like they don't think that the UFC is even like a possible thing. Do you know what I mean? That they thought me saying all this, it's like, you know, it's like. He's literally just chatting rubbish. Like, does he really think he's actually gonna do it? You know what I mean? And then obviously the cage war is about, and then things started like happening and blah blah blah. And then I remember this is right after I signed for the UFC. I told my mum, I said, I'm just gonna come to the salon and like I've got something to tell you. And she was like, oh, okay, because I kept very quiet about it. And then I came into the salon, and some of our employees were like. So what's this big news and stuff like that? Oh, are you on Love Island or something? And I'm like, no, it's not that.
To them, that's like UFC,
Love
Island.
Yeah, I know, seriously, exactly. For them, they would have been really like ecstatic if that was the case. And then I was like, yeah, I've signed a 4-fight deal with the UFC, and I told my mum, and she went really quiet. Like she went like madly quiet. And I thought it was a bit of a weird reaction because, like, I've literally just done the thing that you thought that I probably wouldn't be able to do, sort of thing. Or in my eyes, I don't know how she felt or whatever. Yeah, like she kind of like went very quiet. And I'm like, this is a bit weird. And then she goes, oh, like let's go and grab a coffee. And like again, her employees were kind of like, oh, that's great. You know what I mean? But,
they don't really
but
know
obviously they don't really know what's going on. And then I go outside, and yeah, she literally just burst into tears because she's like, do you know what? I'm so proud of you. I always knew you could do it. So it's like, I think she had that hard exterior just because she didn't want to see me fail, you know. And as a mother, they're obviously always going to be very protective and nurturing. So they want you to have the highest possibility or the highest probability of succeeding. And obviously at that time, I didn't really have the highest probability. It was literally, it's kind of like you put in the work and whatever happens. It could be one punch, it could be whatever, like anything could happen. So for her, I think that was a really quite a touching moment. Like, so in terms of like people doubting me and like not believing in me, like at that point, I kind of thought, you know, maybe at that point she you know, I knew she probably didn't think that this was going to happen because obviously she's always like trying to protect me, you know what I mean? That's what a mother does. But then for her to actually like, you know, like I say, be in tears and actually like really appreciate and be proud of what I've done. And then, you know, obviously get like my nice things and stuff like that. Like it really, like you could see how much that meant to her. So it shows that she really was like supporting me the whole time and wanted me to do well. But she just obviously wanted the best for me, and she didn't want me to end up being heartbroken. So, you know, but that was a very touching moment for me, like in terms of like people that are close to me, because I get more out of people that are close to me. All these people online and stuff like that, it's like whatever. It's just so fickle. They can like chat shit like what, like, you know, something could be blue and a guy on the internet could say it's red. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's just so fickle and so silly, and people are like generally they get jealous and they get, you know, and they want to see people fail because they can't do it themselves. So for me, it's more, I get more of the meaningfulness from, like I say, people that are actually close to me. The things that affect me more is like, yeah, if people say that they're close to me and then they're really not. Like people at the gym and stuff like that, loads of people coming in and out. It's like, whatever.
So I think it's about, in your case, about proving people right rather than proving people wrong.
Yeah.
Some people are driven by their haters, whereas I feel like for you, like you said, you carried so much weight on your shoulders from your family. It's about proving them right.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think her being, of course, coming from, again, an ex-Soviet Union country, it comes from a place of love, right? My parents were exactly the same, because they were always taught that, you know, in order to be financially stable, you had to get a financially stable job, whether that's, you know, engineer, accountant, banker, etc., etc., etc. And to them, then they come into the UK, right, and they don't quite shift their perception into thinking that, okay, there's multiple ways to make money, right? You can be an entertainer, you can be a fighter, you know, and you can make incredible money. I mean, some fighters make, you know, 100x what a lawyer makes in a year and things like that. But I'm really glad it obviously worked out in a way where you finally saw that she did mean to support you 100% and things like that. So, but I think in general, I always tell people that hate never comes from above.
Yeah.
And like you said, these people on the internet, no one's there, you know, training hard and going to the gym and doing really well, and then they come in and like, all right, let me spew some hate online. You know, it's always the couch potatoes, sitting there with their triple chin, going, "Oh, this guy doesn't know how to left kick."
Beer in hand, exactly.
You know, he's useless. I would have done this, and I would have elbowed the guy, and things like that. So let's talk about you then going into the UFC. How different was that UFC experience compared to other professional MMA promotions? So your first fight and the lead up to it, how was that different, and how big of a culture shift was it for you as a fighter?
Do you know what? It was weird because obviously that was during a really weird time in the world with COVID. I was supposed to fight in San Diego for my debut, and then obviously with everything that happened, the world just pretty much just shut down. So, you know, nothing was open, you know, you couldn't do it. So my pretty much all of my UFC fights were behind closed doors. I think maybe the last fight was the only fight where I actually had like people that were allowed
so there was
in the Apex.
Essentially.
There was literally no audience for every single one of my fights, which was a little bit different. But in the way that they take care of you, I think Cage Warriors does get you very well prepared for all of that kind of thing. They do all the media stuff, so all this stuff that I had to do, the obligations that I had to have, it was quite similar, but just on the next step up, basically, from that. So Cage Warriors done a very good job that's why they're the feeder. Like, that's why they're preparing you to be able to be ready for that top stage. The thing I notice about like the UFC is just they do take care of their fighters very well. I mean, in terms of like your nutrition and weight, and like making sure you make weight, they've got like expert nutritionists. Like, they literally have everything down to a T. You tell them your weight, they give you all the food that you need. They give you all the rehydration stuff that you need. Everything's provided for you. You literally don't even have to lift a finger. Right now, I'm gonna have to go back to, you know, doing my rehydration drinks myself and stuff like that. Whereas they have literally got a bag with your name on it. Here you go. Bag with your name on it, all your
whole
food.
support system in place.
Yeah, they literally do that. They've got physios on hand. If you need a physio, you need sports massage, it's done for you. You can literally do so. Yeah, so literally like the first fight we were there, we were in Fight Island, which was basically Abu Dhabi on Yas Island, and yeah, it was literally just, it was weird because it was just deserted. Like, if you imagine, you got all these. Like all these things where there's usually probably people, and like there's a buzz, like, you know, on the beach there's probably, like, it was literally completely deserted, only for the fighters. We're in this W hotel, freaking 5-star hotel, and you know, but like everything that they do to take care of they're literally, you're one phone call away. My manager, if I need anything, he'll just tell one of the coordinators and they'll get straight on it. They'll make sure that you're doing exactly what you need to do throughout fight week. So UFC are very well organized, extremely organized. They give you gloves that are already broken in. So they give you brand new gloves that are already rolled up. So you literally just have to take off and put it on. Whereas you go to any other promotion, they just give you fresh gloves and you have to freaking sit there and scrunch up yourself, like Cage Warriors, for example. So for the UFC to do that, they have like all your kit that's made for you and stuff like that. They get your sizes done specifically. Like, if there's anything wrong, you could just tell them, they change it straight away. Or if you want a different style of short, they get a different style of short for you. Like, everything is done like completely and specifically for you. It's like very personalized. That's what I really enjoyed about the UFC, about the whole experience. And yeah, they just make sure that you don't have to lift a finger. They do essentially everything for you. All you got to do is go out there and fight. But this is why I don't think, I don't know what it's like, but from what I hear, no other promotion is quite the same. You know, the way that they run things is just a completely different thing. So that in itself, I think that's why I want to be back in the UFC, because they're just miles ahead of everyone else in terms of how they take care of their fighters. And I think it'll be a while before those other promotions start to catch up. Even though, yeah, it seems like they're trying to do things that are like, but UFC is just like on the next level. And if we're talking in terms of fighting, my debut and my fight against Oleg Shachuk were actually the fights where I felt the most calm and I felt the most my debut felt like quite like natural.
Did you feel like it was because internally you knew that, okay, now I'm here, I need to perform? Was it like, did your mindset shift going into the UFC to like a next level where you're like, okay, this is the NBA, you know, this is my NFL, I'm here, you know, I'm at the top now, I need to stay at the top. And
It's weird. No, it didn't. It felt like it was just another fight.
Yeah?
You know what I mean?
So let's talk about the first few fights, obviously leading up to the elephant in the room that we're going to talk about. How did those first few fights go, just briefly, and sort of roughly your progression?
So I'll just talk it fight by fight. So the debut, obviously. So I went into this, for some reason I will have this really bad track record of going into fights with injuries and all sorts, but I had really bad bursitis in my left knee leading up to my debut, and I didn't want to pull out the fight, and I'm like, oh, great. So I'm just going to have to get over this. And my knee was like massive, and I was literally having to train the whole fight week. But I must have asked the hotel for about 40 buckets of ice to put. They got this machine that like compresses, and so I literally had to use that every single day at least. You know, I ended up getting a bit of sunstroke as well. Like it's just mad like what I actually went through even just to get to the debut. When I went there, I actually felt like kind of very relaxed. I felt like, oh, this is my time. Like I'm supposed to be here. And then we started getting into the fight. I'm moving around. I started landing a couple of shots. I felt like I needed to work my way into that fight a bit too much. And I think this is something that I've been working on to change in future. I take a bit too long to feel my way into a fight. I need to just get in there straight away from the get-go and turn on. We got into like every single sequence, like all the last 4 sequences of me finishing the guy, my dad has screamed to me what the finish should be. So this is why my dad is like a massive part of my journey in my life, is because he's always the guy that's telling me what I need to do to finish the fight. Like literally be screaming at in the side. He goes, spinning back kick for that, that particular fight. He said, the right hand's gonna land against Hamlet. And here, we got into like the side, and I had the takedown defended. Now he kicked me a couple times in the leg, so it made my knee flare up a little bit more because of the bursitis. So realistically, if I could finish the fight there, I'm going to try and do it, because my knee, was going to be a lot more swollen leading into the next round. So my dad said that there was again, I heard the 10-second clapper go off, and my dad goes, elbows, because like literally I was in the same position that I was for my for the previous fight, and I just went in as many as I could, like literally just trying to land. I didn't really some people say they were all, I think maybe one of them maybe hit the nearer towards the back of the head, but all of them were essentially in the right spot. I just went through that in the changing room beforehand, and then I saw he was like completely dazed. At that point, I'm like, this fight's probably over, because I saw he wasn't standing up. And then afterwards, they called it off, and I was like, yeah, this is good. It was mad because after that fight, actually, it seemed like there was a hell of a lot of controversy. Oh, was it the back of the head? I'm like, do you know what? There's a lot of fighters that have finished fights now, yeah, and no one questions whether it was the back of the head. But with me, for some reason, there's always like some massive oh, I don't know if all the shots are legal. I'm like, what have I done to all these people? Do you know what I mean? But so I got a little bit frustrated that, people were calling it like back of the head. I won the 50 Gs here. I wouldn't have got knockout of the night if they didn't think this was, a good performance. But that really put me on the map. That changed my life. That made me feel, absolutely amazing. Again, nothing could go wrong. I was in the best spot possible. And literally my manager wanted me to progress. He saw the potential in me, so he got me a very tough fight in my next fight. Like I say, I was on top of the world. My belief was through the roof, and and I genuinely, even to this day, I think I could have won that fight, but unfortunately, just when I went into the cage, just something wasn't right. I don't know. I just didn't feel the same energy that I had in my debut. It was a little bit different. It was like maybe, I wouldn't necessarily call it fear, but more nerves. There's a lot more on the line, because now I'm facing a guy. You beat this guy, you're probably going in towards the top 15. That, and it was a pretty quick turnaround as well, from July to October. In terms of the UFC, it was and you could tell they wanted to push me, but unfortunately, I got caught with a shot where it was landing and training for me all the time. It didn't in the fight. So, you know, and Jimmy Crute did an amazing job of actually figuring out what I do and what my tendencies are to really like see how I move and what I do, because he was just working on the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. So that is exactly what landed for him in the fight. So he visualized it, he saw it, and he landed it. And fair play to him. Even though I was absolutely all right after the fight, I wasn't concussed, I wasn't, you know, I was absolutely okay. Even the first shot, I think, that landed, I got straight back up to my feet, as the second one that was underneath that caught me. But yeah, so obviously that looked really bad, like in terms of, you know, a lot of people, all this doubt, that this has just been a massive running theme. Again, I had loads of people doubting me, like, even I had, like, you know, guys like Daniel Cormier, like, kind of looking at me like, who is this guy? Like, because we did interviews before that fight. I was in front of Michael Chiesa, Daniel Cormier, Dan Hardy, like, and we were doing like this, like, kind of a pre-fight, like, scrum, just to get more about me. And he was like asking a lot of questions, like saying, like, but do you really think you can take on this guy? Like, what makes you think that you're that guy to do it? And obviously he was just asking it for, like, to get more about me, to see why the hell am I so confident?
Yeah, good soundbite.
Like, why the hell am I, like, is this guy so confident going into against a guy that's, you know, almost going to be ranked in the top 15? And yeah, it kind of.
Do you feel like that kind of shook your confidence a little bit, having someone that I'm guessing you would have look up to, like obviously Daniel Cormier being a legendary fighter?
100%. So I agree that he's a very high level fighter and he's great, but I don't think it necessarily threw me off. I don't know if it was the pressure or the preparation or stuff like that, because, you know, I train all the time, but, you know, I've had little bits and bobs, different train sessions here and there, and doing different things and stuff like that. Maybe, you know, like I was in a relationship at the time as well, and, you know, maybe external things like subconsciously were affecting me that I didn't realize. But I don't know, just in that fight, it just felt a little bit. And then after the fight, I was obviously completely devastated. And yeah, again, everyone was sort of writing me off again, saying, oh, well, we knew he wasn't going to do good because this is Jimmy Crute and this is who's Modestas. Do you know what I mean? So again, it was like that sort of vibes going on, and, you know, and you're going into the gym, and, you know, again, people that, like, you know, they still look at you like, bloody, you're still UFC fighter, but like, oh crap, like, you know, that wasn't. I hate that, you know, when you go in and you had a bad performance and people have to feel sorry for you. I hate that. Like, I don't want people to feel sorry for me. Do you know what I mean? I need to. I want to be in that situation where, like, you know, I'm celebrating with people, not people thinking like, oh, I'm sorry that had to happen to you, you know. So that was a tough one. But then I just wanted to get back on my feet. I ended up getting knee surgery on my left knee, tore meniscus. So I had to get that sorted, but it was a 4-week recovery, so it wasn't too bad. Told my manager I'm ready to go. Then we had Mike Oleksiejczuk as the next fight after that, and preparation was good. We did a lot more things to negate my lack of game. I had a lack of game plan against Crute, and he had a very strict, exactly what he was doing. I was kind of like, I'm just going in to fight. And so I ended up at that point thinking we need to have a bit of a sharper game plan. So my coaches, we worked a little bit more on that. But even then, like, I think the way that I was training wasn't quite as specific the way I needed to. You know, maybe the coaches, they should have paid a bit more attention and stuff like that. And you know, like, they're amazing coaches, but I feel like I needed a bit. I'm the freaking UFC fighter. None of these guys here are UFC fighters. I need to be the guy that, you know, you're needing to put a bit more of your focus into and stuff like that. And even though my dad always puts focus on me no matter what, like he's amazing. But, you know, and then yeah, we went into that fight and I ended up doing you know, probably one of my best performances. And again, that was a fight where I felt, I'm not that nervous. I just went out there and just started throwing shots and just, like, you know, trying to land on the guy. And actually, that was a fight where I started opening up and letting out more of my skill set, like doing the backwards elbow, the spinning back kicks, the, you know, roundhouse kicks to the head. Like, I'm like, okay, now I'm starting to fight. I'm not, you know, and, you know, I caught him with some big shots. I almost, you know, I hurt him bad in the first, hurt him bad in the second. He hurt me badly in the third, but if I looked at it with 3 rounds, you would have thought they would give me the first round, but unfortunately they gave him the split decision. Now this was already put me in a really bad spot. Now I saw a change and shift in Daniel Cormier's commentary. He started being very sort of like against me, negative towards me at the beginning, saying I was a bit arrogant and stuff like that. And then afterwards, I actually earned his respect. And Joe Rogan was talking highly of me, but I seem to have gotten Daniel Cormier's respect after that performance because I showed more of my skill set, but still not everything. So that was a fight where I'd done very well, but then and then I thought I had to change a load of things again after that fight, and then I ended up moving team, which ended up being a pretty bad sort of decision for me. But so this is now before the Khalil Roundtree fight.
So yeah, let's talk about that. Funny enough, yesterday when I was doing a bit more research for the podcast, I looked at the date of the fight. And what date was that? Do you remember?
Is this was it the 7th of September?
It was the 4th.
It was the 4th.
4th of September.
Yeah.
So today is
exactly a year.
It's a 1 year anniversary of the fight, and let's talk about that. So sort of your recollection from that fight and what exactly happened for those who were unaware of.
Yeah. So basically, I'll just explain it from the earliest stages and everything. But essentially, I got side kick to the leg, an oblique kick they call it. It's a side kick to the knee, and it just crushed my knee, and I couldn't continue. So it was a TKO victory for Khalil Roundtree.
Yeah, that was I think honestly, one of the most gruesome moments I've seen in sort of modern day UFC fights. It was one of those where you see it and then you kind of want to look away, right? Most people I show, like whenever I used to talk about you, even before booking you on for a podcast, it's always the same reaction. Everyone looks at it and everyone goes, fuck. And everyone turns away. So what went through your mind when that happened? What's like the immediate thought? Because obviously you're conscious.
Yeah.
And when that happens, what's the...
So a lot of people don't know. I mean, I've mentioned it before. I don't think many people do. I think even still now, like I said, because the spotlight can quickly turn away from you when things are not going your way. But, and I still have the MRI and everything, but 10 weeks out from the fight, I had a very severe knee injury. I had a knee injury where most fighters would have definitely pulled out. They would have said, I'm not taking this fight. Khalil Roundtree, and at that point, Khalil Roundtree didn't look quite as the Khalil Roundtree that we knew him to be in his previous fights, which he then goes on to explain in podcasts that he had a very hard time mentally, which is why he ended up then changing all that. And so then he ended actually even said that when he ended up fighting me, that was when he felt rejuvenated. He'd overcome the bad things in his life, and now he's ready to go. So I fought Khalil. Do you know what's mad? I fought every single one of these opponents at their very best. I fought Jimmy Crute at his best. I fought Oleg Shachuk at his best, and I fought Khalil Roundtree at his best. And realistically, I went into this fight compromised. To the extent of the injury, I had basically 2 meniscus tears and 75% of my ACL torn before the fight. So that's going into the fight. So you're fighting a high-level athlete, but judging by his previous, this is why you can't judge fighters by their previous performances. You've got to really look deeper into their tendencies and stuff like that, and not just look at, he performed like this in his last fight, so this is probably what he's going to be like. Because from that performance, it looked like, this is a fight that I could go in and do well on, And I thought, well, okay, even with a knee injury, I should be able to still pull it out of the bag, even not being 100%. My knee was clicking the whole camp. It was unstable. But I just got through it, did a load of physio. My physio, Leanne, absolutely amazing. She got me, she always gets me into the cage, but she properly monitored it and made sure that everything was okay. I asked the doctor, I said, listen, what do you reckon? Can I fight? I want to know how bad is this? He said, if it was anyone else, I would probably say don't do it. But because you've built enough strength in your leg to keep the stability, we should be okay. He said, look, we'll reconvene with this after the fight and we'll fix it. But for now, I think you can take the fight. Would I advise you to? I mean, probably not. But can you fight? Yes. because your knee will be able to handle what you should need in the cage if you're okay in training, right? So I was like, okay. Obviously not expecting that it would get sidekicked. But we went into the fight and everything was okay. And again, a lot of people don't know this, but my dad ended up getting a hypothermic reaction prior to the fight. So we had the whole trip ended up being the biggest load of bullshit ever. When we did our COVID tests to go over there, my dad's tests come back as unclear. So my dad couldn't go with me to the US when I was going. So I was like, oh my God. So I had to go, but my dad had to stay here and do another COVID test to make it come up as I'm like, oh my God. So, and it's because they made us do it ourselves. So obviously he didn't do it deep enough or whatever. And I'm like, so they're supposed to do it. They're the freaking medical professional, right? And so then basically he comes the next day and then he ended up having the most crazy trip, like getting into the US. No one came to pick him up. Like from my manager went mad, and like the UFC, like they should. I think that because it was weird, like they had a new driver, like that came to pick us up, and they kept walking around all in the airport. Even when I went there, he didn't come at this. He didn't wait at the place where the guys are coming out. He went all the way around the airport. So this exactly the same thing happened to my dad, and this was like late at night. So my dad had no numbers. I had to like literally he had to phone. He had to try and find someone to phone someone to be able to get. He got to because he didn't even know the proper name of the hotel. He got the hotel, and then I made sure. I said I went downstairs and said, listen, my dad's going to be coming here. Just make sure there's a key and blah blah blah. And then he got to the He got to the wrong hotel. And they had to get to another one, which was their hotel that we were staying at. He went all this craziness. And then he ended up getting to the hotel. The security guards weren't letting him in, like basically because he had no identification or anything like that. But then because I told the woman that my dad was coming, she said, oh, no, it's all good. He's going to his son, blah, blah, blah. And then finally he managed to get to my room and it was okay. So already from the get-go, the trip had not started off on the right foot. Then we were training at the PI, and then my dad, being the tough man that he is, he ended up going. The plunge pool was like freezing temperatures, right? So he ended up staying in the plunge pool for like, I swear to God, it must have been like 15 minutes.
Classic Eastern European dad moment.
Underwater, like fucking, you know what I mean?
The whole shebang.
Yeah. He's like, I can stay in here all day. And then, and then he goes into the jacuzzi and he's like, my legs are feeling a little bit weird. And then, so yeah, anyways, in the morning he wakes up, he like comes to my room, he says his throat's like closing up, and I was getting really worried because I'm like, what the hell's going on? Like, you know what I mean? Did he get an allergic reaction?
Was this the day of the fight?
This was the day of the weigh-ins. This was the day of the weigh-ins, yeah. So, and I was just like, what the hell was going on? And this was the morning before the weigh-ins. So I made sure, checked my weight, everything's all good. And then I see my dad like literally like shaking and this was a really scary moment for me because I'm like, what is actually going on? If he's got an allergic reaction, what are they going to do? They had to bring the medics in. They pulled him out on a wheelchair, him like finding it hard to breathe. And like, yeah, I was already in a bad spot already whenever that was happening. Mentally, I was just all over the place. I was like, so my dad's going to hospital. Is he going to be okay? Like, what's going to go on? I had to go and still do what I had to do. I had to go and do the weigh-in. I had to go and do everything. Luckily, I managed to phone my dad after the weigh-in, and they said that he was okay and he was going to be back at the hotel. But already leading up to that point, like my dad going into hospital and I'm going in and weighing in and doing all these things. Essentially, you know, I had my training partner with me, but I kind of felt on my own still because it's usually my dad that does these things with me.
Being in your corner.
Yeah, exactly. So but then it got to the day of the fight and everything's all good. We're in the workout room or in the changing room before the fight. We start kicking, we start doing everything. I kick the pad and I feel a click on my knee. And I'm just like, oh, this is not good. I felt like a little click on my knee. And they said, Modestas, you've got 5 minutes. I was like, fuck, how do I get this? Then I kicked the wall as hard as I could, clicked back into place. So it was literally
one way of doing it.
Yeah. Well, this is it exactly, and not the way I would have expected it to go. But then it clicked back into place. I was like, okay, so we're okay now. But even then, I'm like, I'm compromised, man. Like I was like, this is not good. It made me, you know. And then when I went into the fight, I thought, okay, just calm, do what you've been doing in training. I'm landing the front kick all the time, like literally jab, front kick all the time. First front kick I land, catch, counter, bang. Literally, I think I break my nose in the first punch that he throws. So I'm just like, so I've literally had all this bullshit with my knee, and now I'm getting my nose broken, and it already looks horrible already, and now I'll get it even more broken. Do you know what I mean? Airwaves are gone, blood coming through. He's coming all aggressive, and then I'm just trying to find my bearings. Everyone's screaming at me like, you got to take him down, but like, I'm in that moment, I'm thinking I need to get back in with the striking. I need to feel comfortable again before I can even go and do that. Like I felt in a way like losing your power. Like you feel like you're not quite as strong. You feel like you're weaker. So it's like, oh, if I go for a takedown and he stuffs it, then you know what I mean, he's going to stand up and start throwing these big ass shots again. Do you know what I mean? So it's like all these things are running through your mind. Like, you know, you start doubting yourself as soon as things start not, like I say, not going your way. You've got a bad knee already, and the next thing you know, he's clipping you with these shots, and you're trying to find your way back in to try and gain some sort of ground on him, and you just can't do it. Just before the second round, like, they're just telling me, you got to change level, you got to do this. And, you know, my dad was already starting to get angry because he's like, this is not the Modestas that I know. Like, he needs to do something. And apparently what he said, my dad tells me, is like, he said that going into the third round, if it would have got to that point, my dad would have literally just pushed the other coach out of the way and said, like, Modestas, you need to fucking man the fuck up and get in there and like throw some bombs back in. What the hell's wrong with you? Because I was literally just throwing jabs, trying to find the range to land other things. Like then the cross starts landing, but I'm still like waiting to find that. It's like you're waiting too long. You need to get in there straight away from the get-go. And I didn't do it. Had a bad knee, had a sideward stance, and then he was just waiting for it. He was just timing it. He saw that I had a sideward stance. Apparently he heard in an interview that I had a bad knee, but I think I only talked about the operation that I had earlier, which then everything was fine. But he heard somewhere that I had a compromised knee or whatever. I'm jabbing him, I'm catching him, but I'm putting a lot of weight on my front foot. He sees that, side kicks me, and then at that point, 75% torn ACL is not going to hold against a side kick of that power with Khalil Roundtree. So obviously it wasn't good. That was probably the lowest I've ever felt in my life. And I knew at that point, realistically, my UFC career would be over. I was hoping that it wouldn't. Like, I was genuinely hoping, like, everyone saw that I, you know, against Oleg Shachuk, like, the judges would just, like, clearly they must have been blind because, you know, that was a fight. Because then that would have probably kept me in. Do you know what I mean? But it's like, mad how one fight would have changed me. And it's like, even in that, but in that fight, I didn't throw the fire enough. I didn't make it enough of a fight because I was worried about being technical, worried about being, you know, trying to get it right. And, you know, even my training partners, like towards the end of the training camp, like they weren't quite as aggressive because I'm always landing in exchanges in the boxing, so I wasn't being put in the fire as much.
So what I wanted to ask about is, what was that first week back like? Because obviously at first you're in Vegas, there's still a lot going on, like you said, there's the flights, your mind's busy, right? But we all know that you're always weakest when you're at that point where you're on your own, everything kind of settles down, there's no distractions, you're sitting there at your house. What were those emotions like? Because I'm guessing it must have been a lot when you kind of start processing.
When I was sitting in the hospital bed after the fight with my leg and I didn't know what was wrong with it, like that's when I properly broke down. And like my dad was trying to tell me, like, you know, don't show your weakness to everyone. Like don't show that you're crying. But I'm like, I can't help it. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is probably the worst thing that could have ever happened. You know what I mean? And it was just like that was the most tough moment for me. When I got back home, it was a bit weird because I think I was more motivated to fix my knee. So I was just worried about these doctor's appointments and like, you know, like, you know, at least I'm home with my family and everything. It's like, although that didn't turn out the way it wanted to, but hopefully things can now start moving forward. I'm just like, I'm at that point, I'm just like, I just hope like the worst is over. And then obviously everything leading up to the operation, I was just trying to train a little bit. Like I was maybe kind of living my life a little bit, like in terms of just kind of like just chilling, resting, like maybe I was just trying not to focus on the actual fight itself because it just really like properly upset me. But yeah, when you're at home, you're crying, you don't know what the hell to do. You constantly you want to hit yourself because you're like, why the hell did I not perform the way I wanted to? It's been a constant theme that I've been performing under my potential. It doesn't matter what the hell you do in training. I trained with John Jones, did so many rounds with him, and I still lost my fight within quick succession. It's like, it's how you do on the day. None of this training crap matters. You know what I mean? And even if you think everything's going good in training, you might be training something different and it changes in the fight, and you've got to be able to adapt. That's why it doesn't matter about training. You can do everything tendency-wise to get yourself in the right spot. But if it's not, in the fight, if something changes, you've got to be able to adapt. And I didn't adapt. That was what was really killing me. I was just like, why didn't I fucking fight? I felt like a pussy. Like I genuinely felt like I let everyone down. I felt like, do you know what? For Lithuania as well, I felt like this highly touted guy, like he's gonna bring glory back to the country, and now I've just fucked it for everyone. I've literally I didn't fight. I felt like I didn't fight. I felt like I didn't. I watched the fight back, and it's like there were good things, but there were a hell of a lot of bad things, and there wasn't enough that I did. I'm like, Modestas, you've got all these skills. Why are you not using it, man? Like, that's what I said to myself. I looked at the fight, I'm like, I'm so much better than this. Like, I'm so much better than this. And that was, and then you're only as good as your last performance. People think you are that guy. So that hurt a lot as well. Knowing that people think that I'm that guy and I'm not the guy that I know I am.
But what would be the main factors that pushed you through? Because I remember I was watching your vlogs at the time, and you're quite a positive guy, but I remember even in the vlogs, you could tell that you were like down in the dumps, but you were still pushing through, and you're like, all right, guys, I'm here doing upper body. And I remember then there was a complication with your knee, so you had to get another surgery. What would you say were the main factors that pushed you through, and what would you recommend to people that might be watching this right now and maybe dealing with like an injury like that or something like that? What would you advise for people? What was the...
So with the injury, I mean, you've always got to think that you're gonna overcome it. You're gonna come back. You've got to always keep that in the back of your head. You can't concentrate on what is going on right now. You've got to concentrate on what you can change. You've got to control what you can control and not what you can't control. You can't control what people are going to think of you. You can't control how your knees, you can't control all these other things. But okay, what can I do? I can. My knee's in a cast. I'm not getting my MRI till next week. I've got to wait till next week. What can I do? I can sit here and punch, or I can do this. I can do certain things. You got to do everything that you can. That's why I actually ended up doing those vlogs, because I'm sitting in bed doing fuck all, and I'm thinking to myself, I need to do something to try and get my name out there. I need to try because you're thinking as well, money and everything. It's like, well, how can maybe vlogging can help me do? You're thinking of different things. I was just trying to stay on a positive light. Like, okay, I'm going to try and do other things outside of it from what I can't do. So, and then slowly you just start seeing things. But it's step by step. I think, then I got hit with obviously the news that I got cut by the UFC, which whilst during recovery and everything was just, that was probably the lowest I've ever felt, for sure. I ended up drinking quite a lot as well, like in my bed, basically. So I've got my leg up in this bandage, cast and everything, and I'm literally just drinking myself to sleep most nights because I'm like, I can't take this. Like this is literally, especially when I got cut, it was like the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I thought everyone was against me. I thought, I ended up with my relationship, things went to shit at the time, and like I said, I just didn't want to talk to no one. I didn't want to be around anyone. I just wanted to, I didn't think that would happen. I didn't think that I got the UFC license plate, and I thought that all this that I had been through to even just get to that point, to make it, to be that guy, and I was just literally, as soon as the dream happened, within quick succession, it's got taken away from me again. So it's just like, that's what kind of really hurt. But when I had the operation, so first off, it was one. I know it sounds like very doom and gloom and whatever, but it starts getting better in a little bit. But obviously the the operation itself was the most painful because they had to do so much to it. My physio actually watched the operation because she wanted, that's why she's the most amazing physio ever. Like, honestly, I can't thank her enough. These are the types of people that keep you going. You know what I mean? As much as my family and everything else, but Leanne, like, for her to watch the operation so she can understand my knee structurally a bit better so she could do my physio to cater towards that. I mean, who the hell does that? And I was very thankful that my doctors also allowed her to stay because some doctors may say, no, you're not allowed, but she's, you know, a medical professional also, so they let her in. But yeah, they did so much crap to it. I was literally in the biggest pain I've been in my life. I had these things up my nose because my nose was broken, obviously. So I had to, and I was literally, that was the most annoying thing, was I was constantly tearing up because I had these massive sponges, like they look like tampons, like about that big, like all the way up my nose. And like they told me after 36 hours you could take it out. And as soon as it got to 36 hours, I was just literally these fat ass things. I was just like literally just slowly pulling it out of my nose. I've got some pictures on there I'll show you afterwards, but it's like literally like slowly grabbing this thing out my nose. And it was just like, oh mate. Once that was off, then I'm like, okay, now I've only got to worry about the pain about the knee. Like we're all good about the nose now. Now we just got to worry about the knee. And yeah. So as the days go on, really, as you know, I'm trying to do my YouTube channel. I'm like trying to show my recovery, trying to show what I'm going through, because these are the only things that I can focus on. That's what I had to do essentially. So that kept my mind off of like the bad things. I'm just thinking, okay, maybe I can help people in different ways, or I can show people what it's about. And you know, maybe it'll be something that they'll care about. Even if it isn't, it's something for me to make me feel like I'm going towards a goal. So if that's one thing already, is that the more you're going towards a goal, even through this hard time, just know that there are going to be all these roadblocks, but you've got that goal, you're still going towards it, and you've got little things that little tasks that you're trying to get past. So I've noticed that with my physio, like slowly but surely, it started getting to a point where I could, you know, bend my knee more and do more things. I could get off my crutches, do more movements, but it's just a slow, progressive process. And it started, and you know, and the more and more you see bit by bit things getting better, you doing better, the knee getting better, things falling into place, getting a job, you know, because I had no money. Like I was literally broke. So I made barely any money from that fight, from loads of different things. But anyways, so obviously that was a big worry for me. Okay, now I've got a job. Okay, so that's good. I've got a job now. My knee's getting slowly better. I'm being around people again. I'm sorting these things out. So slowly, as you're building on top, things are just slowly getting better. You're slowly digging yourself out of this hole. You know, you're not thinking about this, but the thing is, people expect you not to feel upset and not to have these things affect you. Sometimes you got to just sit there and just accept that you feel the way that you do, and that the situation that you have is really crap, and that not to think that you shouldn't feel like that. No, it's gonna feel crap. It's gonna feel horrible. Accept it, understand it, and then figure out how you're going to move on. Because a lot of people, they get consumed by the fact that, oh, why is the world against me? Why does everything never go right? Like, if I would think like that, I wouldn't be in the position where I am right now.
Victim mentality.
Yeah, you can't be a victim.
Yeah.
Exactly. You've got to be the guy who's like, I'm gonna fucking make it through this shit. Like, I'm not gonna, you know.
So let's go on on a happier note then.
Yeah.
I remember I was telling you before the podcast, I was always keeping an eye on your Instagram, and you obviously, like most people would at that point, you kind of disappeared. And I was like, okay, this is either gonna make him or break him. And then you uploaded that video. It was like a compilation of him doing the maddest things. What was it? You were doing like all sorts of jumps, and you were doing like the whole knees over toes stuff.
Yeah.
And your knees like in all kinds of flexion. And I was like, holy shit, he's back. And the comeback king.
Yeah.
So how did you feel at that point? That must have been cool when you posted that video and you're there doing kettlebell swings, and you probably looked more powerful than you looked before your fight.
I appreciate that, mate. Yeah, no, it was crazy because when I got to that point, when I was able to, because obviously my physio was even then, she was like, bloody hell, Modestas, you need to calm down a little bit. Like you're going a bit crazy here. Like we need to take our time with this, you know, to get this recovery proper. So look, I had the second operation, everything, because I had this loads of swelling that happens in like literally 20% of ACL surgeries, but they fixed it. It was absolutely good. After second surgery, then my recovery went, literally it skyrocketed after that. After the second operation, then I was finally able to start moving everything properly and blah, blah, blah. And then, yeah, it gets to the point where I remember the first time I was even able just to put my bum to my heels, I was like, wow. I wasn't able to do this before. So you make little victories, man. Every single step of the way, you're like making little. Oh, I can kick again. Oh, I can jump again. Oh, I can do. You're slowly working towards the bigger picture. You're going about your life. You're doing everything that's normal. You're doing your work. You're making your money. You're doing all these things, and slowly but surely, things are starting to get better and better and better. And even the clients at the gym. I'm an idiot sometimes. You know what I mean? I like to show off and blah blah blah, but like. I'm obviously demonstrating exercise. I'm like doing jumps and like fucking like, you know, stuff on the floor. And then the clients are just looking at me like their eyes wide, like, Modestas, like, are you sure you're supposed to be doing that? I'm fine. You know what I mean? Like jumping on boxes and stuff like that. And, but yeah, when it got to that point, it's like, do you know what? I always knew I was going to come back. I always knew I was going to prove like the people who were doubting me. I know I was going to prove those people wrong. I was going to prove my supporters right. I always knew that it was going to get to the point where I'm going to come back. The comeback story is happening. It's like, especially when you're going, you can't go into a comeback story half-assed. You got to go in it, full everything in. Do you know what I mean?
Do the whole Rocky montage.
Exactly. You can't just do it with little, you know, kind of dip your toes. You need to literally just go all out, freaking plunge yourself in there, and yeah, like that was the main thing that was actually motivating me the whole time, is that as I'm getting better, the actual thought of coming back and performing another big thing actually was in my training to correct all the things that were actually, I know in the fight, not working.
Yeah.
I went back to my old team in Northampton, who I'd left just before that fight, which was a mistake, but you live and learn. I basically come to accept a lot of the mistakes that I made. This is another big thing, that you need to accept where you went wrong and actually I become a lot more open-minded. I'm like, okay, let's try and listen to everything, and then we're gonna just narrow it down and figure out exactly what things are gonna be working for me. Exactly, take only the good things. But I'm gonna listen to everything, no matter what it is, because even if I think it might be, oh, why would I need this? I could use it. Do you know what I mean? You've got to be very, like Bruce Lee would always say, do you know what I mean? Take what is useful and disregard anything. So that's exactly what I did. And I started seeing the improvements in the martial arts side of things. So as you're making improvements in the martial arts side of things, as you're improving with your knee, as things are starting to come together, you have your good days, you have your bad days, but you're going in this little like kind of like
positive trajectory.
Yeah, overall, it's going the upwards, you know, upwards way. That's when, you know, you start getting more motivated. You know that it is in sight. It's mad because the picture in my head of me coming back and me winning fights and me doing things is now, that vision is starting to become reality, because I'm making the appropriate steps day by day to try and get myself back to that point.
So it's like picking up those little victories throughout the recovery progress. And I think that's huge, because you said that like every time you get the little victory, whether it's like having, you know, the ability to do a full squat or, you know, extend your knee and things like that, it gives you that motivation and it gives you that drive. So I wanted to touch a bit on gratitude. And I see on your right arm you have a tattoo. Can you tell the audience what exactly does it mean?
Yeah, so it's a Bible quote. It's called Philippians 4:13, and it's I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And basically, I've got another religious tattoo there, obviously with Lithuanian words there as well. Pasiaukojimas, tikėjimas, meilė, and shema.
So it's sacrifice, believe, and then love and family, right?
Yeah.
So all the things that are important to you. So let's talk about the amount of sort of influence that faith and belief has on you. Because I know, of course, I read up a lot about your dad, and he studied obviously philosophy and psychology. So I'm guessing that must have influenced you quite heavily throughout your life. What part of your sort of mental preparation stuff does that play, like faith and belief in general?
I've had many times where I've questioned faith. I've had many times when obviously when things don't go right, you almost think like there's someone that's just out to get me. They ain't trying to help me. They're trying to like literally just strike me down and make, because I had a lot of that throughout like my whole life, and it's just like it takes a lot actually for someone to still believe that there's good times even when bad times are happening. And I know Conor McGregor says that also, and it couldn't be any truer. But it just there is someone looking out for you. This is the thing. I think what brought me closer to my faith, actually. Obviously, my dad would, like, you know, religious. We went to church and stuff like that. We would always pray. His mum, my grandma, meant a hell of a lot to me. Like, we've got a picture of her up on the wall in our house, and she would always say, how do you say God in Lithuanian?
Dievas.
Dievas, yeah. So she would always like say like these things, like, you know, obviously, like, you know, I'm praying to God to we want better things to happen. I'm praying for you. Like, she'd always say these things. So that was already a connection.
Because it's very deeply embedded in our culture and even in our language. So, for example, a lot of older people, like you said, like my grandparents used to say, like, when they're very happy about something, they used to always say, like, in English, it's thank God. In Lithuanian, it's ačiū Dievui. It's like, oh, thank God that happened. Or it's like when they say goodbye, they say su Dievu, which is like, you know, with God and things like that. So you're right. I think that older generation, of course, they're very religious.
And especially because I got on so well with her, and she meant a hell of a lot to me. You know, so obviously, that in itself, like, made me want to continue this faith, like, going, like, and then with my family and stuff like that. And then, you know, you have your experiences, you have your good times, you have your bad times, you have even just the environment that you put in, you get away from your faith. I got away from my faith quite a lot, like, even though I would still pray and this and that, but like, I was kind of going in and out of it, different situations, different environments, different schools and stuff like that. You kind of go in and out. I actually went to America for 2 years, and I went to a Catholic school. And they would actually do mass, and like, you know, I had a girlfriend at the time who'd go to church on Sundays, and you know, before that I was kind of like going away from my faith, but actually going to America, although I was there for basketball, I you know, praying and like, you know, telling God, like, you know, like, help me get through these bad times, actually helped me get through all of that, and it actually brought me closer to the faith. So going to mass, going to church, and actually being put in that environment where I was exposed to it and subject to it a lot more, and because it was, like, as a Catholic school, they did like proper masses all the time, and I even got to speak to the priests, and like I would ask them, I'll tell them about my problems, and I'll say, like, you know, what does God want from me? And they would give me like these elaborate, like, amazing answers that just empowered me, that I'm like, okay, I understand this a lot more. So that brought me much closer to that's actually why I ended up getting these tattoos, because what it made me realize is never stray away from your faith, like, because these are the things that are going to keep you on the right track, that are going to put you on the right place, not only mentally but physically and spiritually, everywhere. It's going to put you in the right place in order for you to do well. So I'm you know, I still pray a lot now, but that's more what I keep in terms of faith, is more just knowing that there's a higher power, and praying and being wishful that things are gonna, and just know that things are always in a bad situation gonna get better. Someone's always looking after you, and there is a plan. Do you know what I mean? Like, all of these lessons that I've had, like, if I would look at it as like, oh my God, all this is crap, like, why the hell has this happened to me? I'll never get to where I am right now, and not even to what is going to come. But I know that I had to learn these lessons in order for me to be prepared for what is to come. Do you know what I mean? And this is where the faith comes in, because these are the teachings that are given in the Bible. So although I don't agree with everything, like, as I think many people have their own particular views, but what I do believe in is that there's a higher power, there is a path. All of this is meant to achieve something completely different. This is preparing me for what is to come, and I'm very thankful, and I pray to be grateful for all those things.
Well, it's the hero's journey.
Yeah.
I think I remember I messaged you when your injury happened. I think you didn't reply for a while, because obviously, like I said, you were in different place. But I said, this is going to be that part in the hero's journey where you suffered the hardships, right? And you're going to build up from there. So in some other podcasts, you mentioned some books and things like that. So I'm guessing you're quite an avid reader. I know you spoke about Tim Grover's books quite a bit, you know, on competition, and you also mentioned some other books. What would you say was some, let's say, 3 books that influenced you in your life quite heavily?
Right, so 48 Laws of Power, actually, because like, you know, I know it seems like a very sort of grim, like dark way that I'm speaking about things, but because obviously there's a load of good times, a load of happy times, and this and that, and but you got to understand that to win and compete in this world, you've got to understand different things about people and the way they all work. So 48 Laws of Power is definitely a great book. There's a couple of things in there that really like resonate with me, and just makes you understand people and understand the world, and how you are going to enforce your power across across the world and within your being. That's a great book. Obviously, Winning by Tim Grover. That's a
Great book.
absolutely amazing book. He's also got Relentless as well, but I think that was the predecessor to Winning. And and again, it's like one thing that really sticks with me is winning has no loyalty to anyone. So, you know, you could do everything right. You could, do everything to a T. Your diet's amazing, and the guy who's literally drinking and for example, John Jones, could be drinking and partying, but still goes and wins. Winning has no loyalty to no one, but you got to still keep going without any lack of enthusiasm. You got to keep going with that same energy, even if things don't go your way, because you're learning, you're getting better, and you're going forward. But in terms of winning, you have to make sure that you are doing everything possible is to win, because if there's someone who's doing something different out there, then everything's got to be. You got to put all the cards in your favor. If you're not doing everything right, you're putting a little bit of cards less in your favor, and then it's up to luck and whatever luck of the draw who's going to win that. Do you know what I mean? So that's another really really amazing book. And The Art of War is another great book as well. It's mad because obviously a lot of those things are sort of more geared towards like the generals and stuff like that. So talking about like kind of larger formations and stuff like that. But there's so many, even like acting like you're strong when you're weak, or when you're weak acting like you're strong and stuff like that.
I think the important thing, it was in 48 Laws of Power that they speak about, like you mentioned. Some people might look at it as quite an evil book.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's there to like learn how to control people and how to rule over people. But I think they said that essentially in life, we're all playing a game. And just because you don't want to play a game doesn't mean you shouldn't know the rules.
Yeah.
Because then someone else is going to play that game better than you, and they'll play it against you.
Yeah.
So you need to know this as a prerequisite in life. Yeah, and I think it applies to everything, right? So like you said, they geared like Art of War was written by a war general, right? By a Chinese war general, by Sun Tzu. But in reality, it applies to so many things in life, whether it's business, and especially fighting, because fighters are, of course, modern day gladiators and warriors. So all of those laws, I'm sure you applied quite a lot. I mean, it's been amazing so far, but one thing I always like to finish on: what advice would you give to someone on the path to, become a professional fighter who's maybe 16 years old, 18 years old? What advice would you give them?
Try and learn as much as you can. Basically, be as open-minded as possible, and just realistic. I know it's such a cliche, but it's like just never give up, because you're going to have many times where you go into training, you get your ass whooped. Sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail, but you got to be able to go through that whole process in order to be able to get better and actually learn a lot of things. It's just to be as open-minded and learn as much as you can. For someone who's 16, 17, try and learn all the jiu-jitsu, learn everything there is to be done about wrestling. Do everything from the ground up, you know what I mean? Because I feel like some guys have to like sort of rush to get their knowledge together. Or maybe they started when they're like 22, 23, and then they need to have like almost like a crash course on everything.
Yeah, that was me.
That's it, like playing the catch up. But if you're doing everything in their each art in this purest form, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, striking, you learn all those separately, learn how to do them the best, and then blend them into MMA, you'll become a much better MMA fighter. That's something that I've learned for sure. Like, I've actually learned all these arts specifically on their own, like individually. And yeah, I can do them all individually, but now I'm starting to learn how to use them in MMA a lot better. And this is coming into the sort of second half of my career, is actually learning how to put it all together. Because if you ask people who I wrestle with, can I wrestle? They'll tell you I can wrestle. You ask people how's my jiu-jitsu? They'll say my jiu-jitsu is good. Striking, the same. But it's like, you know, in terms of fighting, it's like, how can you put those together, blend them together, make them the best, so that you can, you know, overcome your opponent basically with the most skill sets. So yeah, just learn as much as possible.
So what's next for Modestas?
So obviously, I signed my contract with Cage Warriors. I've got 5 fights with the UFC get out clause. So if the UFC sign me earlier, which they will do, before those 5 fights, then yeah, I can leave. But the next thing is in November. I know 100% I'll be fighting in London. Don't know the exact date, but it will be sometime around there. I'm going to win the Cage Warriors belt again. That is going to be the next step, because I would have been the first person in history to have vacated it and won it again. And then also the first person in history to vacate it, win the belt again, and vacate it again to go to the UFC again. So essentially, what's going to be in the future is that I'm going to be back in the UFC, and I'm going to be back a much better person than I was when I went in the first time. And I would have learned a hell of a lot of lessons. And I'm very thankful for the whole experience. It's been tough, but yeah. The Baltic Gladiator ain't done.
The comeback story is going to be epic. Thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. Guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you got some value out of it, which I'm 100% sure you did, leave a like just to say thank you to Modestas for his time. And where can people find you on social media, on YouTube, etc.?
Yeah, so Modestas Bukauskas, if you just type in my name on YouTube, you should find a couple of my horrendously stupid videos. Yeah, and then Instagram, it's at MODYB24, and both and I think on Twitter it's Baltic Gladiator, and I think that's everything. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Man, thank you so much,
This has been
my brother.
epic.
Really
Thank
good
you for
talking
watching,
to you.
guys. Take care.